All right, we've made it to the final third section here, and we're going to be talking about the Collector app. So the basic idea with this app is that someone can take some pictures of some collection that they have. That can be CDs, DVDs, stuffed animals, video games, stamps, whatever it is. They can take pictures and essentially digitize it by giving these items a name and then being able to scroll through each of these items. So with this, there's three main things that we're going to be covering. First, we're going to set up the UI, sort of get visually everything in place. This includes talking about the sketch, where we're going. Then we're going to allow the user to take photos. So this is the whole piece of, is the user going to take a picture with their camera? Are they going to take a photo that already exists from their device? That whole workflow that we've just learned about. And then the final one is allowing saving with core data. So when the user selects a photo, whether it's a picture or one that they've taken off their phone, we want to associate that with the name, put that into core data, and be able to pull that back out of core data to show it up inside of a list. So we're going to go ahead and get started first with setting up the UI. To get a little bit more detailed, we're going to walk through the sketch. I really recommend not moving forward with any app until you know where it is that you're going. And then we're going to just set up all the visual side of the app. So we're not going to dive into any of the code necessarily for, taking pictures, saving to core data, anything like that, but we just really want to make sure the visual side is hammered down. All right, so we're ready to go ahead and dive into this Collector app, and this is a really fun app for me. In fact, let me tell you a quick story about how I got the idea for this app. I have an aunt who's very into sewing. She makes all sorts of clothes for people. She's big into costume design, things like that, but she has a ton of patterns for her sewing. So if she wants to go make a skirt, she has to dig through her skirt patterns and sort of look through each of them. And she also had this issue of, all of her patterns were at her house, and if she was ever out, found some really cool fabric, she didn't have a way to remember, oh, which pattern did I have? And in those patterns, how much, fabric does it require for, X skirt, something like that. And so she wanted a way to sort of digitize her library, and that's where I got the idea for this Collector app. So I've made a quick little sketch here on just a piece of paper. I'm a really big believer that before you move forward with any sort of app, you should draw what it is that you're going for so that you know where it is that you need to be. If not, you're going to waste tons and tons of time inside of your app. So here's what the Collector app looks like. You can see in the very first view controller, we've got the name of the app up here and also this plus button that allows us to add something new to the collection. So if someone hits this plus button, it's going to take them to a new view controller where then we've got a nice big UI image view here, insert a photo, have a title for what this image should be. And then up here in the top right, we have the icon of a camera and the icon of a folder. And this essentially allows the user to either take a picture of something or allows them to save something into the folder. So if this was going to be for my aunt's fabric design patterns, she would go ahead and, hit the camera, take a picture of that and say, this is, the cool skirt or the European skirt, whatever it is the title of that pattern would be. If it was going to be a collection of, stuffed animals, like this is the Pooh Bear stuffed animal, whatever. So once the picture's been taken and a title has been added, next the user hits the add button. That will then spit them back to this view controller where now we'll see in this list whatever title was specified here, but also an image inside of the table view. So this is going to be something new that we'll learn with how to show images inside of a table view. That's going to be pretty exciting. So you can see when I did the example for this, I was showing someone who wanted to collect DVDs. So I've got some of my favorite movies in here. Sandlot, Goofy Movie, Inception, Wonder Woman. Inception, did that movie blow your mind? I left my head spinning for a while after I saw that. But anyways, that's besides the point. Let's go ahead and dive into it now. So we're going to start a new Xcode project. So just go ahead and open up Xcode. And we're going to choose Create a New Project. We want a single view application. And let's go ahead and call this, I'm going to call mine the Collector. Okay. For the team, especially if you're going to be testing this on your physical iOS device, I would select choosing whatever your developer profile is. You can always go back and change this in the project settings, but probably good to have from the get-go. Choose your language, but then also make sure that you have use core data checked here. This is a really big thing that you want to make sure that you have because we're going to be using it later. We're not going to start with it right now in this video, but that is something that we're going to be diving into. So Make sure you have that checked, and we'll go ahead and move on and create a copy of this on the desktop. So now that we have this here, I have a little practice that I always like to when I'm making an app, be able to test the app and make sure it's always working in a working state. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the run button here just to make sure that this app is working. When I do this, we should see nothing but a blank screen, but this tells me I'm starting from a good point and I can always move forward from there. It's kind of my design coding philosophy that should work in little itty bits, make something new, test, make sure that that was okay, and then move on. Or else sometimes you can code something for hours and hours, test it out, and it's broken, and you can't remember, well, is it something that I wrote like 5 minutes ago that was a problem, or was it something 2 hours ago? So our app opened up, we've got the white screen. That means we're at a great place to start. So like I said, the main focus of this video is we want to get things set up visually. So let's go back to our drawing here. The first thing that we're going to want to do is want to make that table view controller that lists the whole collection. So let's go over into our main.storyboard, and it starts us out with a view controller, but we don't want a view controller, we want a table view controller. So I'm actually going to have this selected over on the left side, hit the delete key, get rid of that. I'm also going to get rid of this view controller file because that's connected to the previous one, and the name view controller for a view controller really isn't all that great. So we'll move that one to the trash. So back to the storyboard here, we want to create a table view controller. So let's go ahead and drag one of those out. Great. And we want this table view controller to be embedded in a navigation controller. And the reason for that is we want to make it so that, you know, when the user hits a plus button, that they can go ahead and actually see the details of that app there. So we'll go ahead, and while we have this table view controller selected, we're going to go up to editor and say embed in, and then select navigation controller. And you can see we've got this whole new navigation controller, and it's done all the work of setting this up as the root view controller. If for whatever reason you ever wanted to change this, you can always delete that connection and just select the navigation controller, hold down the control key, click drag, and then say I want this to be the root view controller. So don't have to do that. I just want to make sure that you understand how that all works. So now with this navigation controller, we need to make this the initial view controller. So go ahead and have this selected, go to the attributes inspector, and come down and check is initial view controller. So with that in place, we're ready now to start adding some details. So let's go back to our sketch here, and we're going to add the name collector up at the top. So I'm going to double click here. Well, it's not allowing me to get that. So in this case, we want to go ahead and select the navigation bar over here on the left side, and we're going to have to mark its title. Let's go ahead and try this now. No, it's really not letting me do that. So, oh, the navigation item, this is what we're looking for. So up here inside of the table view controller, I was in the wrong one. The navigation item, this is where we can set a title. So I'm going to call this the collector. Great. Now we've got that showing up there. The next step for us is we want to have that nice plus button, right? We want to be able to show a bunch of different items. So let's go ahead and search for a button. Now we don't want a straight up regular button. We actually want this bar button item. These work well with the navigation bars. So we're going to drag this bar button item, and you can see I could put it on the right or I could put it on the left. You can also put it in other places, but make sure it's here inside of the navigation bar on the right side. Now you could change this to say, you know, for example, something like add item or something like that. I prefer the simplicity of just using the symbol of a plus button. I think that gets the description, the idea of what we're trying to do across the easiest. So we're going to go ahead and instead of just having this be regular old button, we're going to choose system item, and we're going to choose add. And you can see that that gives us the plus button. Now there's all sorts of options here, right? We could do edit, which shows the text edit, but some of these other ones like trash, so shows an actual trash can. A search is another one. We've got like the magnifying glass. So let's go back to add. I think that's a good look for our app. So we're already pretty close. We didn't do any designing here on the table view cells, but that's going to come later when we actually want to fill in that information. So we'll hit pause on that just for now. But then the next thing that we want to do is have a view controller where the user can then add an image. So let's go ahead and get a new view controller. And we'll just click and drag this out here. And there's a couple of things that we're going to want to do here. But the first one is we want to connect this plus button to this view controller so that when the user taps on this, it instantly brings up this view controller. It does a segue. So we're going to control, click, drag, choose what type of segue. We want a show segue. That's going to move us over here. With this, we want to be able to add our own custom title up here to this view controller. So we're actually going to search for a navigation item, and we're going to take this navigation item and we're going to bring it into our new view controller. So I'm just going to go ahead and place that there, and now I can add a title. So for instance, I'm going to go ahead and call this one new item, just so that we know where it is. And right now the default back button here, it says the collector, which I don't really think is great. And if we want to change what this back button says, we have to go back to this navigation item and change the back button to, for instance, this just say back. I think that really describes what we're, go back to the main screen. I think the collector makes things a little bit difficult. So with that in place, we need to add bar button items here as well, that folder in the camera. So let's go ahead and search for a bar, and that should give us the bar button item. Let's see, there it is, bar button item. So first we'll drag one. Let's make this the camera. Go ahead and select that. That looks pretty good. We're going to bring in another bar button item, and you can see we now have the option to either place this on the left or the right. So when you put these in, you can always swap them back and forth. It's really easy to change that, but just know that that's sort of how these are ordered. You really don't want to put things on the left side, especially with a UI navigation controller, because that's where the back button is going to be showing up. So you got to be very careful. The only instance would be, for example, on this main view controller, the root view controller, you can probably put some things on the left there because there's no way to go back from this initial root view controller. But with this, let's go ahead. We wanted to have a folder on the left side. And so if we're going to look for a folder, let's see, was it compose? No. Organize. There we go. So you can choose the icons that you want. You could also, if you really wanted to, specify images here, use your own custom images. But I prefer using the system ones because they're used by lots of apps, and that makes it easier to understand by the user what these are about. So we've already got the top portion of that done. We're making some really great progress on designing this app. We really just have to now go ahead and set up this bottom part. So let's go ahead and jump back into Xcode here. And the first thing that we're going to be adding is this image view. So let's go ahead and search for a image view. There it pops up, the only image thing that we can add, and we'll just sort of go ahead and put that there. Now for deciding the size of this, just remember that we have to be able to have enough space for a keyboard down here. Whenever the title, the user goes to type in the title, we have to have enough space there. So I'm just going to choose an arbitrary size. You can sort of play around with this. I think something maybe like 300 by 300 is going to be a good size. And I want this to be fairly close from the top. I'm going to maybe choose 10. So I'll go ahead and add my constraints. I'm going to make sure that this is centered. I'll go ahead and center that. And you can see we have this fit. And it still seems a little bit too big for me. So I'm going to go to the ruler here while I have this image view selected. And I'm going to be changing some of these constraints. So for example, let's edit this to maybe be like 250. Oh, not 150, 250. And that means we also need to change the height to 250. Yeah, this is about more what I was thinking. And you can sort of play around with this if you want to see what's going to be right. The other cool thing that you could do if you wanted to was just sort of have it fill up the maximum width. In fact, this might be a good idea for app because we can choose appropriate scaling here. So let's go ahead and just delete the width that we have. And instead, we're going to take this image view and say, you know what, you should go 10 to the left and 10 to the right. Go ahead and add those two constraints. And now it's filling up this whole box. Now you might think this is kind of weird, but depending on what type of image the user takes, this will allow some great viewing, especially if it's a landscape image. But again, when we go ahead with this image view and we select the content mode, if we do aspect fit, then it doesn't matter if it's going to be a portrait one. It'll just take up the same space as if it was a square photo. So with all of this in place, the next thing that we're looking for is the text field. So let's go ahead and search for that. There's a text field. We want to bring this just below. There we go. So we're going to want to have this have a certain width, and let's go ahead and just give it maybe an arbitrary width of something like 200. Okay, we'll add that constraint. We want it to have vertical spacing, so hold down your control key, again click drag. We'll give it some vertical spacing, and let's also make sure that this thing is centered horizontally. So with that all in place, the next thing that we're going to want to do is have some placeholder text so that the user knows what it is that should be typed inside of here. So we're going to just say title, and let's go ahead and see what this looks like. Maybe we'll have to run the app to see that because I can't see title showing up there right now. So maybe we'll just have to run that through. And then the next thing that we're going to need is the add button. So let's go ahead and search for a button, and we'll go ahead and put that down below. Change this to say add, and we want this to have vertical spacing, and we also want that to be centered. Great, so we have visually everything that we need here. We've got a quick warning. Let's see what it is that we're going to have. Fixed width constraints may cause, and also it's telling us here, this could be an issue. We can do the auto fix here, which would be set constraints to greater than or equal to, so that means that it could extend its width. I think probably a more proper way to handle this is, let's go back and let's actually take this text view and let's delete its width constraint right now. So select and delete, and instead let's just have it go a certain space from the left on each side, so maybe 50 and 50. Let's go ahead and add those, and then it will sort of grow and shrink with whatever. Now if we're going to do that, we should really commit to sort of having everything sort of centered, right? The buttons in the middle, the images in the middle. Let's have the text also be in the middle. So with this text field selected, we're going to have the text be sort of in the middle there. And with this all in place, let's go ahead and give this a run on the simulator and make sure it's exactly what we're looking for. So we get our build succeeded here. Here comes the app. Now you may notice in the recording here that there's kind of some lines that show up and then disappear, and you're saying what's about? Well, with the table view and the simulator that we have here, the actual device that's being simulated is more pixel dense than my laptop that I'm recording this on. So it has a hard time deciding whether it should show a line or not. So if you ran this on an actual iOS device, you would have no sort of issues with lines showing and disappearing. This is purely just trying to fit the simulator on the screen. In fact, if we take this window size here, and this is the physical size, if we uncheck this, I'm trying to get this to zoom in. Let's see, hardware. Oh, maybe it's not going to let us zoom in like we're hoping for. Maybe if we get rid of the device bezels there. Let's zoom. There we go. You can see when we're zoomed in, you can actually tell, look, pixel accurate. This is what we're looking for. So now this is pixel for pixel what this should look like. But I really like seeing the device bezel, so I'm going to bring that back, and let's change it to physical size so this will fit on the screen. But with that in place, we'll go ahead and hit the plus button here. This looks pretty good, right? We've got the text for the title there. I might add some ellipses on that. I think that makes it look a little bit more like, you've got to add a title inside of here. We've got these great looking buttons. We've got that add button. And if we type in here, let's go ahead and make sure we can toggle that keyboard, toggle software keyboard. Look at that. There's enough room to fit everything inside of there. We get that nice clicking noise. So that's all good. Really, the only thing that's a little bit of drag to me is when the user first opens this, they're just going to see this blank white space. And it's like, what is supposed to happen? If it is the first time that they've opened up the app, they might not know that they need to go select an image, and, eventually that's going to fill up there. So I think we should have some sort of a placeholder image. And I'm going to go use something from flaticon.com. So I'm going to go open up Safari and go to flaticon.com. Remember, again, with these images, you need to provide attribution unless you have paid version. So let's go ahead and just search for camera. I think just like we have on our sketch here, if we have some sort of, little camera or something like that, specifying that we need to add a photo there. That's going to help us. So let's go ahead and see what sort of results we have here. This is a pretty good looking camera. So we'll go ahead and view this in a little bit bigger detail and see if this will be good for our app. So let's download this as a PNG 512. Make sure to provide credit to the author. That was smashicons.com, and oh, for some reason that died on us. Let's try that one more time. See if we can't get this icon to download. So I finally got that to download. You can see the little camera there. So let's go to our assets, and I'm going to bring in this camera. I'm going to keep its name as photo camera. That seems just fine. And we'll go back to the storyboard here, and I'm going to select this UI image view and change that to be photo camera. Now you can see it's super stretched right now. It does not look good at all. I'm going to change this to be an aspect fit. And so if we go ahead and do this, this will stay inside of the proper spacing. You can choose other ones if you want, like aspect fill, but this doesn't do very well. Although this does present a great problem for us to fix now. As you can see, it sort of bleeds over the edges. So with this image view, we want to go ahead and select this clips to bounds, but make sure we go back to selecting here aspect fit. And it's up to you. You could choose aspect, fill if you wanted to. I think the big issue you'll run into there is if someone has taken pictures of something for their collection. For example, if it was my aunt with her patterns for her sewing, if she had taken a picture knowing that, all corners were going to be inside the image, maybe she zoomed in all the way so she could read the tiny details. She wants that full image to be showing up here. She doesn't want something zoomed in and cut, like if we do this and that's, not showing the top and the bottom there. So I think aspect fit is probably the best situation for our user. So with this in place, let's go ahead and test this out one more time and make sure this looks good. Go ahead and give our app a second here to show up. Okay, there's the collector. I hit the plus button. Look, there's that nice camera. That sort of specifies that it's sort of a placeholder at this point. And we can then, eventually write the code in order to get this filled in.